The letter trembled in Rebecca Wright's hands as she stared at the dilapidated shack where the stagecoach had dropped her off. Miles from anywhere in the Nevada desert. A far cry from the thriving cattle ranch described in Harlan Shaw's advertisement for a wife. She had traveled for weeks from Boston, leaving behind everything familiar, only to find an abandoned homestead with a leaking roof and not a soul to greet her. Rebecca smoothed her travel-worn dress, a garment that had once been her Sunday best but now bore the dust and grime of the long journey west. At 23, she had hoped for a fresh start after her parents' deaths left her without prospects in Boston. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like divine providence. Successful rancher seeking educated, respectable wife to share prosperous life in Harlan, Nevada. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears as she studied the paper once more. The carefully penned letter that had accompanied the advertisement described a 2-story home, acres of good grazing land, and a man of integrity who promised to be a devoted husband. Now the brutal reality mocked those promises. As the stagecoach disappeared into the distance, Rebecca realized she was truly alone. The nearest town, according to the driver, was Harlan, still miles away. She had only the clothes in her trunk, $20 sewn into the hem of her petticoat, and the broken promises of a man she'd never met. Gathering her resolve, Rebecca dragged her trunk to the shack's doorway. The wooden door hung from a single hinge, and when she pushed it open, the interior revealed little more than an old table, a broken chair, and a straw-filled mattress that had clearly housed more rodents than people in recent months. "I suppose this is home now," she murmured, her voice sounding small in the vast emptiness around her. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart race. Rebecca stepped back outside, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun. A rider approached, his silhouette growing larger against the horizon. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. Perhaps this was Harlan Shaw, arriving to explain some terrible misunderstanding. The man who rode up to the shack was not what she had expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, he sat easily on his horse, wearing dust-covered denims, a faded blue shirt, and a well-worn hat pulled low over his eyes. When he removed the hat, she saw a face weathered by sun and wind, with keen blue eyes that assessed her with unmistakable surprise. "Madam?" he asked, dismounting with fluid grace that belied his size. "Are you lost?" Rebecca straightened her spine. "I am looking for Harlan Shaw. This is his property, is it not?" The man's expression shifted, a flash of something unreadable crossing his features. "Harlan Shaw, you say?" "Yes, I am Rebecca Wright from Boston. Mr. Shaw and I have been corresponding for 6 months. He sent for me to be his wife." She felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment at having to explain herself this way. The stranger's face darkened. "Miss Wright, I'm afraid there's been some kind of mistake. I'm Henry Stevens. This land hasn't belonged to Harlan Shaw for nearly 2 years now." Rebecca felt the ground sway beneath her feet. "That cannot be. I received letters from him just last month, describing his ranch and inviting me to come west." Henry Stevens removed his hat completely, revealing thick brown hair with strands of gold where the sun had lightened it. "Miss Wright, Harlan Shaw left these parts after his ranch failed. He sold this parcel to me before he headed to California. I've been working the neighboring spread and haven't had time to do much with this place yet." "But the letters," Rebecca's voice faltered. "I don't know about any letters, madam, but Harlan Shaw isn't in Harlan anymore. And this," he gestured to the ramshackle structure, "was never much more than what you see now." Rebecca's legs suddenly felt unable to support her. She sank onto her trunk, the enormity of her situation crashing down upon her. She had spent her last dollar on the stagecoach fare. She knew no one in Nevada. She was utterly alone and completely deceived. "Are you saying I've been tricked?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Henry shifted uncomfortably. It wouldn't be the first time Shaw has pulled something like this. He's been known to, well, to make promises he had no intention of keeping. But why? What could he possibly gain from luring me all the way out here? Henry's expression softened with sympathy. Sometimes men out here get lonely, start writing to women back east. They make up stories, pretend to be something they're not. Then when reality gets too close, they disappear. He asked for no money, Rebecca said, bewildered. Some men just like knowing they could convince a woman to drop everything and come to them. It's a kind of power, I suppose. Henry looked genuinely apologetic. I'm sorry, Miss Wright. Truly I am. Rebecca stared at the dust swirling around her boots. Every penny she had, every possession she could claim, was either on her person or in the trunk beneath her. She had no family to return to, no home waiting in Boston. What will you do now? Henry asked gently. Rebecca looked up at him, determination replacing despair. I don't know, Mr. Stevens, but I came west to build a new life, and that's what I intend to do with or without Harlan Shaw. Henry nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. Listen, I can't leave you out here alone. My ranch is about 5 miles north. I can take you into Carlin tomorrow, help you find work maybe. The town's growing, and there's usually need for educated folks. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition, Miss Wright. Out here, neighbors help neighbors, even if we've just met. He offered her a small smile. My housekeeper, Mrs. Whitman, lives at the ranch. She's a respectable widow, so your reputation would be quite safe. Rebecca considered her limited options. Night would fall soon, and she had no supplies, no protection against the elements or wild animals. Henry Stevens seemed honorable, and the mention of a housekeeper provided some assurance of propriety. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I would be grateful for your assistance. Henry lifted her heavy trunk as if it weighed nothing, securing it to his horse. Can you ride, Miss Wright? I've had some experience, yes. He helped her mount, then swung up behind her, maintaining a respectful distance while still ensuring she wouldn't fall. As they rode away from the shack, Rebecca couldn't help but look back at what might have been her home, had Harlan Shaw's promises been true. Don't worry, Miss Wright, Henry said, noticing her backward glance. Carlin's a good place with good people. You'll find your footing. Rebecca nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. She had come west with dreams of marriage and a home of her own. Now those dreams lay shattered in the dust of an abandoned homestead. The ride to Henry's ranch took nearly an hour. As they crested a hill, Rebecca gasped at what lay before her. A sprawling ranch house, painted white with green shutters, surrounded by corrals, barns, and bunkhouses. Cattle grazed in the distance, and a creek wound its way through the property, lined with cottonwood trees. This is yours? She asked, unable to hide her amazement. The Running S, Henry confirmed. My father started it 20 years ago. I took over after he passed on in '67. It's beautiful, Rebecca said honestly. As they approached the main house, a plump woman with gray streaked hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression registered surprise at the sight of Rebecca. Henry Stevens, who've you brought home this time? She called, though her tone held more amusement than censure. Mrs. Whitman, this is Miss Rebecca Wright from Boston, Henry explained as he helped Rebecca dismount. She's had a difficult journey and needs a place to stay tonight. Miss Wright, this is Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, the finest housekeeper and cook in all of Nevada Territory. Mrs. Whitman's shrewd eyes assessed Rebecca, softening as she noted the young woman's travel-worn appearance and obvious distress. Well, you look like you could use a hot meal and a bath, child. Come inside. We'll get you settled. As Henry carried her trunk into the house, Rebecca followed Mrs. Whitman into a spacious kitchen filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and stew. The older woman guided her to a chair at the large wooden table. "Now, sit yourself down while I fetch you something to eat. Then you can tell me what brings you all the way from Boston to our little corner of nowhere." Rebecca sank gratefully into the chair, the warmth of the kitchen and Mrs. Whitman's motherly concern already easing some of her anxiety. Henry excused himself to tend to his horse, promising to return shortly. Over a bowl of hearty beef stew and warm bread, Rebecca explained her situation. Mrs. Whitman's expression grew increasingly indignant as the tale unfolded. "That Harlan Shaw, I always said he was no good," she fumed. "Strutting around town like a peacock, bragging about his non-existent fortune. When his ranch failed, he left owing money all over Carlin." "I feel so foolish," Rebecca admitted. "I should have been more cautious." Mrs. Whitman patted her hand. "Nonsense, child. You're not the first to be taken in by a silver-tongued deceiver, and you won't be the last. The question is, what now? Mr. Stevens mentioned taking me to Carlin tomorrow to look for work." "Yes, that's sensible. The schoolteacher just married and moved to Denver. The town council's been looking for a replacement. Can you teach?" Rebecca brightened. "I was a teacher's assistant in Boston for 2 years before my parents fell ill." "Well then," Mrs. Whitman smiled triumphantly. "Providence works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? You came seeking one thing and may find another entirely." After dinner, Mrs. Whitman showed Rebecca to a small but comfortable bedroom. The luxury of a real bed and clean linens nearly brought tears to her eyes after weeks of travel. "Rest well, Miss Wright," the housekeeper said kindly. "Things often look brighter in the morning light." Alone in the room, Rebecca unpacked her nightgown and a few toiletries. Despite Mrs. Whitman's encouragement, anxiety still churned in her stomach. She had come west with such different expectations to be a wife, to have a home of her own. Now she faced an uncertain future in a strange town. She moved to the window, gazing out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. The vastness of the Nevada landscape both frightened and exhilarated her. Perhaps Mrs. Whitman was right. Perhaps this detour in her plans was actually divine intervention, guiding her toward a different but equally fulfilling path. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Wright? It's Henry Stevens." Rebecca opened the door slightly. Henry stood in the hallway, respectfully keeping his distance. "I just wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said. "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Whitman has been very kind." Henry nodded. "She mentioned you might be interested in the teaching position in Carlin. It seems a possibility worth exploring." "It is. The town needs a good teacher." He hesitated, then added, "Miss Wright, I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the teaching position, you're welcome to stay here until you find your feet. The West can be harsh, but it rewards those with courage and determination. I believe you have both." Rebecca felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the cozy room. "Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Your kindness to a stranger is unexpected. Out here we're all strangers at first," he said with a smile. "But not for long. Good night, Miss Wright." "Good night, Mr. Stevens." As Rebecca closed the door, she felt a curious lightness in her heart. Perhaps her journey west wasn't a mistake after all, even if its purpose had changed. With that comforting thought, she prepared for bed, exhaustion finally claiming her as she slipped between the clean sheets. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Rebecca woke to the sounds of the ranch coming to life, men calling to one another, horses whinnying, the distant lowing of cattle. After dressing in her best remaining outfit, a navy blue dress with white trim, she made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Whitman already busy in the kitchen. "There you are. Sleep well?" the housekeeper asked, placing a plate of eggs and bacon on the table. "Better than I have in weeks," Rebecca admitted, taking a seat. "Henry's already been up for hours," Mrs. Whitman said, pouring coffee. "He said to tell you he'll be ready to take you to town after breakfast. The town council meets this morning, so it's a good time to inquire about the teaching position." Rebecca ate quickly, nerves and anticipation making her stomach flutter. By the time she finished, Henry had returned to the house, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. "Ready for Carlin, Miss Wright?" he asked. The ride to town took nearly an hour. As they traveled, Henry pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's history. Rebecca found herself fascinated by his knowledge and his evident love for the land. Carlin came into view as they rounded a bend in the road, a small but growing frontier town with a main street lined with wooden buildings, some quite new. People moved about on their morning errands, and wagons kicked up dust as they rolled down the street. "It's not Boston," Henry said apologetically, "but it's got good bones. A church, a school, 2 general stores now that the railroad's bringing more people through." "It's lively," Rebecca observed, watching a group of children chase each other near the water trough. They tethered their horses outside a sturdy building with a sign reading Carlin Town Hall. Inside, several men were engaged in discussion around a large table. They looked up as Henry and Rebecca entered. "Henry Stevens, what brings you to town on a Tuesday?" asked an older man with impressive white side whiskers. "Mayor Ellis, gentlemen," Henry nodded respectfully. "I'd like to introduce Miss Rebecca Wright, recently arrived from Boston. Miss Wright has experience as a teacher's assistant and might be interested in the school position." Rebecca found herself the center of attention as every man at the table turned to study her. She straightened her shoulders and stepped forward. "Good morning, gentlemen. As Mr. Stevens mentioned, I have some experience in education. I would be grateful for the opportunity to discuss the teaching position, if it remains available." Mayor Ellis's bushy eyebrows rose in appreciation of her direct approach. "Well, Miss Wright, that's fortuitous timing. We were just lamenting our lack of suitable candidates." For the next hour, Rebecca answered questions about her background, her teaching philosophy, and her reasons for coming west. She spoke honestly, though she omitted the more humiliating details of Harlan Shaw's deception, saying only that her arranged marriage had fallen through upon her arrival. The council members seemed impressed by her poise and knowledge. After a brief private discussion, Mayor Ellis turned back to her with a smile. "Miss Wright, we would be pleased to offer you the position of schoolteacher for Carlin. The term begins in 3 weeks, which should give you time to settle in. The salary is $40 per month, with living quarters provided above the schoolhouse." Relief and excitement surged through Rebecca. "Thank you, Mayor Ellis. I accept with gratitude." "Excellent," the mayor beamed. "Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house has a room available until the schoolhouse apartment is ready. I'm sure she'd be delighted to have such a respectable tenant." Outside, Henry congratulated her warmly. "I knew they'd see your worth right away. Carlin's lucky to have you." "I'm the fortunate one," Rebecca replied. "Without your help, I might still be sitting by that shack, wondering what to do next." Henry's expression sobered. "About that, I've been thinking. That property between my ranch and town, it's good land. Just neglected. I bought it cheap when Shaw left, thinking I might expand someday. But if you're staying in Carlin, you should have something of your own." Rebecca stared at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "The deed to that land, I'd like to transfer it to you. Consider it an investment in Carlin's future through its new teacher." "Mr. Stevens, I couldn't possibly—" "You're not taking charity, Miss Wright," he interrupted gently. "That land needs someone who'll care for it properly. Someone with determination and vision. I believe that's you." Rebecca was speechless. After the betrayal that had brought her to Nevada, Henry's generosity seemed almost too good to be true. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" she finally asked. Henry's eyes met hers steadily. "Because I believe in second chances. Because I've seen how the West can break people who come here with dreams, and I don't want that to happen to you." There was something in his gaze that made Rebecca's heart beat faster. "Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept. Say you'll build something on that land that will make you proud to call it home." "I accept," she whispered, overwhelmed by his kindness. After introducing Rebecca to Mrs. Patterson and ensuring she was comfortably settled at the boarding house, Henry reluctantly prepared to return to his ranch. "I'll be back in a few days with the deed," he promised. "And if you need anything before then, just send word." As Rebecca watched him ride away, she felt a curious mixture of emotions. Gratitude, certainly, but also something else, an awareness of him as a man, not just as her benefactor. She pushed the thought aside. Her life had already taken one unexpected turn. She needed to focus on establishing herself in Carlin before contemplating anything else. The next 3 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Rebecca met many of Carlin's residents, including several of her future pupils and their parents. Most welcomed her warmly, though a few seemed reserved, perhaps waiting to see if this Eastern woman would adapt to their Western ways. Henry visited twice, bringing the promised deed and helping her make plans for improvements to the property. They rode out together to survey the land, and Rebecca began to envision what it could become with proper care. "The soil is good," Henry noted as they examined a field. "With some work, you could have a productive garden here, maybe even an orchard eventually." Rebecca nodded, already making mental calculations. "And the creek provides a reliable water source. The shack would need to be torn down, of course, and a proper house built." "I could help with that," Henry offered. "My men and I were good with our hands." Their eyes met, and Rebecca felt that same flutter in her chest. There was something about Henry Stevens, his quiet strength, his unfailing kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, that affected her in ways she hadn't expected. "You've already done so much," she protested weakly. "I'd like to do more," he said simply. The day before school was to begin, Rebecca moved into the small apartment above the schoolhouse. The space was modest but clean, with new curtains donated by the Ladies' Aid Society and a patchwork quilt for her bed made by Mrs. Whitman. As she arranged her few belongings, a knock sounded at the door. Henry stood there, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I brought you a housewarming gift," he said, offering a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautifully bound edition of Emerson's essays. Rebecca traced the tooled leather cover with her fingers. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "How did you know Emerson is one of my favorites?" Henry smiled. "You quoted him once when we were riding back from your land. Something about adventure." "Life is a journey, not a destination," Rebecca supplied, touched that he had remembered. "Yes, that." He cleared his throat. "Miss Wright, Rebecca, I also came to invite you to supper at the hotel restaurant this Saturday, to celebrate your first week of teaching." Rebecca felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I would be delighted, Mr. Stevens." "Henry, please." "Henry." His name felt right on her lips, as if she'd been meant to say it all along. The first day of school was both exhilarating and exhausting. Rebecca had 22 pupils ranging in age from 6 to 16, with widely varying levels of education. Some could barely write their names, while others had clearly benefited from previous schooling. By day's end, her voice was hoarse from teaching, her dress smudged with chalk dust, but her heart was full. These children, from the shy Perkins twins to boisterous William Jones, were now her responsibility. Their education, their future prospects, depended in part on her ability to impart knowledge and inspire learning. As the week progressed, Rebecca settled into a routine. She rose early, prepared her lessons, taught until mid-afternoon, then stayed to help struggling students or prepare for the next day. Evenings were spent grading papers, reading, or occasionally accepting dinner invitations from parents eager to know their children's new teacher. Saturday evening arrived, and with it, her dinner with Henry. Rebecca dressed with special care, choosing her best dress, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair, and arranging her curls in a style that was both respectable and flattering. Henry was waiting when she descended the schoolhouse stairs. He looked handsome in a pressed shirt and string tie, his usually wind-blown hair neatly combed. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The hotel restaurant was Carlin's finest establishment, with white tablecloths and a menu that included delicacies not often seen in frontier towns. As they dined, Rebecca shared stories from her first week of teaching, and Henry told her about his ranch and his plans for the upcoming cattle drive. "Will you be gone long?" she asked, surprised by how much the thought of his absence troubled her. "About 3 weeks," he answered. "We're driving the herd to the railhead at Elko. It's not a difficult route, but it takes time." "I'll miss our conversations," Rebecca admitted, then blushed at her boldness. Henry's eyes warmed. "As will I. Perhaps when I return we could ride out to your property again. See about starting work on a proper house before winter sets in." "I'd like that very much." As they walked back to the schoolhouse under a canopy of stars, Rebecca felt a sense of contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Carlin was beginning to feel like home, and Henry was becoming important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated when she first arrived in Nevada. At her door, he took her hand gently. "Rebecca, I know you came west expecting something different. I hope you're finding that Carlin, for all its rough edges, has something worthwhile to offer. More than I ever imagined," she assured him, looking into his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, but Henry was too much of a gentleman. Instead, he squeezed her hand and bid her good night, promising to see her once more before he left for the cattle drive. The following weeks established Rebecca firmly in Carlin's community. Her pupils responded well to her teaching methods, and even the most skeptical parents began to appreciate her dedication. She joined the church choir, attended town meetings, and slowly, the pain of Harlan Shaw's deception began to fade. True to his word, Henry visited the day before his departure. They rode to her property, and he showed her where he thought the new house should stand on a gentle rise with views of the distant mountains. "I've ordered lumber to be delivered while I'm gone," he told her, "and I've hired Jim Parker and his sons to start the foundation. By the time I return, we should be ready for framing." "You've thought of everything?" Rebecca marveled. "Not quite everything." Henry looked uncharacteristically hesitant. "Rebecca, I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel, that is, I've come to care for you deeply." Rebecca's heart raced. "Henry, you don't need to say anything now," he hurried on. "I just wanted you to know before I leave. When I return, perhaps we could discuss possibilities." Possibilities. The word hung between them, full of promise. "I would like that," Rebecca said softly. "I've come to care for you too, Henry, more than I thought possible after Shaw's betrayal," he finished for her. "I understand. Trust takes time to rebuild. I'm willing to wait, to prove myself worthy of yours." In that moment, Rebecca knew with certainty that this man so different from the fictitious Harlan Shaw of her imagination was someone she could trust not just with her land or her future, but with her heart. The day of Henry's departure dawned clear and crisp. October had brought cooler temperatures to Nevada, and the hills surrounding Carlin were touched with gold and amber. Rebecca rose early to see the cattle drive off, joining other townspeople who had gathered to watch the spectacle. Nearly 1,000 head of cattle filled the valley north of town, with cowboys on horseback keeping the herd together. Henry rode among them, calling orders and checking details. When he spotted Rebecca at the edge of town, he broke away momentarily. "I'll be back before the first snow," he promised, reaching down from his horse to clasp her hand. "Be safe," she urged, reluctant to let go. With a final smile, he rejoined his men, and soon the dust from the moving herd obscured him from view. Rebecca watched until the last rider disappeared over the horizon, then turned back to town and her waiting pupils. The next 3 weeks tested Rebecca's patience. She threw herself into teaching and supervising the initial work on her house, but thoughts of Henry were never far from her mind. Would he return safely? Would their budding relationship continue to grow? Had she been wise to open her heart again so soon after her disappointment? Then one evening, as Rebecca was correcting arithmetic exercises in her apartment, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Whitman, her face grave. "Rebecca, dear, you need to come with me. There's been an accident." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "Henry," Mrs. Whitman nodded grimly. "The cattle drive returned this afternoon. There was trouble, rustlers, a stampede. Henry was injured. He's at Doc Miller's now." The world seemed to tilt beneath Rebecca's feet. Without pausing to grab a shawl, she followed Mrs. Whitman down the stairs and through town to the doctor's house, which served as Carlin's medical facility. Inside, they found several ranch hands waiting anxiously. Their expressions when they saw Rebecca told her more than words could the situation was serious. "How is he?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Doc's with him now," answered a weathered cowboy she recognized as Henry's foreman. "He took a bad fall when his horse was spooked during the stampede. Hit his head on a rock." "Will he?" Rebecca couldn't finish the question. "Henry's strong, Mrs. Whitman said firmly, taking Rebecca's cold hand in her warm one. "And he has something to live for." The door to the examination room opened, and Dr. Miller emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. The lines in his face deepened when he saw Rebecca. "Miss Wright, I didn't know you and Stevens were acquainted." "Please, doctor, tell me straight." Dr. Miller sighed. "He's taken a severe blow to the head. There's swelling, and he hasn't regained consciousness. The next 24 hours will be critical." "May I see him?" Rebecca asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, "Don't expect any response, but sometimes familiar voices help." Rebecca entered the room quietly. Henry lay still on the narrow bed, a bandage wrapped around his head, his face pale against the white pillowcase. She took the chair beside him, gently taking his hand in hers. "Henry," she whispered, "I'm here. You need to get well. You promised to help me build my house, remember? And we have possibilities to discuss." His fingers remained limp in hers, his breathing shallow but steady. Rebecca sat with him until Dr. Miller insisted she leave, promising to return in the morning. For 3 days, Rebecca divided her time between her pupils and Henry's bedside. When she couldn't be with him, Mrs. Whitman or one of the ranch hands maintained the vigil. Word spread through Carlin about the beloved teacher and the injured rancher, and townspeople stopped by with food, offers of help, and promises of prayers. On the 4th morning, Rebecca arrived at first light, exhausted from another night of fitful sleep. To her surprise, Dr. Miller met her with a cautious smile. He woke briefly during the night, the doctor told her, asked for water, seemed confused, but knew his name and where he was. It's a good sign. Relief made Rebecca's knees weak. "Thank God. May I stay with him?" "Yes, but remember he needs rest. Don't tax him with too much conversation if he wakes again." Rebecca settled into the familiar chair, taking Henry's hand as she had countless times over the past days. This time, his fingers twitched slightly in response. "Henry?" she whispered hopefully. His eyelids fluttered, then opened to reveal the blue eyes she'd missed so desperately. They were clouded with pain and confusion at first, but cleared somewhat when they focused on her face. "Rebecca!" His voice was hoarse from disuse. Tears sprang to her eyes. "Yes, it's me. You've been hurt, but you're going to be all right." He frowned slightly, as if trying to remember. "The stampede. Don't worry about that now. Just rest and get better." Henry's eyes began to drift closed again, but his fingers tightened around hers. "You're here," he murmured, wonder in his tone. "Of course I'm here," she whispered. "Where else would I be when you need me?" A faint smile touched his lips before sleep reclaimed him, but his hand remained firmly clasped in hers. Henry's recovery was slow but steady. Within a week, he was able to sit up and take solid food. By the second week, Dr. Miller allowed him to return to his ranch, with strict instructions to avoid physical labor and horseback riding for at least another month. Rebecca visited daily, bringing books to read aloud when Henry's headaches made reading difficult for him, and updating him on the progress of her house construction. The foundation was complete, and the framing had begun, creating a skeleton of what would become her home. "Jim Parker says we'll have it enclosed before the first snow," she told Henry one afternoon as they sat on the ranch house porch. "Then interior work can continue through winter." "That's good," Henry nodded. "Parker's reliable. He'll do right by you." There was something wistful in his tone that made Rebecca study him more closely. "What is it, Henry? You seem troubled." He sighed, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his healing ribs. "I promised to help build your house. I meant to be there for every step, not lying useless while others do the work." "You're not useless," Rebecca protested. "You're healing as you must. Besides, you made all the arrangements before you left. Without your foresight, there would be no house under construction at all." "Still, I made a promise." His gaze met hers directly. "I don't take promises lightly, Rebecca. Not like some men." The unspoken comparison to Harlan Shaw hung in the air between them. Rebecca reached across the space separating their chairs and took Henry's hand. "I know you don't. That's one of the many things I admire about you." His expression softened. "What else do you admire, Miss Wright?" There was a teasing note in his voice that she'd missed during his convalescence. "Your kindness, your integrity, the way you care for your land and your animals and your people." She smiled. "The way you look at me sometimes, as if I'm the most fascinating person you've ever met." "You are," he said simply. "From the moment I found you standing beside that broken-down shack, looking so lost but still so determined, I knew you were extraordinary." Rebecca's breath caught at the naked admiration in his eyes. "Henry, when you were injured, I was so afraid. It made me realize how important you've become to me in such a short time." "Rebecca," he straightened in his chair, suddenly serious. "I know this may seem hasty, but my accident has reminded me how unpredictable life can be. I don't want to waste any more time. I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day." Joy bubbled up within her, bright and unexpected. "I love you too, Henry. Then will you marry me?" "Not right away. I want to court you properly first, the way you deserve. But knowing that you'll be my wife someday would make this old ranch house feel like a palace." Rebecca laughed, tears of happiness threatening to spill. "Yes, Henry Stevens, I will marry you. But I insist on a proper courtship too. At least until my house is finished." "Your house?" His eyebrows rose in surprise. "You still intend to live there?" "Of course. I own that land now, remember? Thanks to a certain generous rancher." Understanding dawned in Henry's eyes. "You mean to keep your independence?" For a little while, she confirmed. I came west to build a new life, Henry. Thanks to you, I have that chance. I want to prove to myself more than anyone that I can stand on my own feet before I become a wife. Instead of disappointment, respect and admiration filled Henry's expression. You continue to surprise me, Rebecca Wright. Very well. We'll court properly while you teach Carlin's children and build your house. And when you're ready, truly ready, I'll be waiting. Not too long, she promised softly. Just long enough. He raised her hand to his lips, sealing their understanding with a gentle kiss. I'd wait forever for you. The first snow of winter dusted Carlin in early December, just as Rebecca's house was enclosed. The structure was modest but solid, 4 rooms downstairs and 2 upstairs, with a covered porch and large windows to capture the spectacular views. Throughout the construction, Henry had provided guidance from afar, his expertise proving invaluable even when he couldn't physically help. By Christmas, his health had improved enough for light activity, and he began escorting Rebecca to social events around town, church socials, the Christmas pageant at school, a New Year's dance at the town hall. Their courtship became the talk of Carlin, with most approving of the match between their respected teacher and the prosperous rancher. As winter deepened, work continued on Rebecca's house. The interior walls were plastered, floors laid, a proper stove installed in the kitchen. By February, Parker declared it livable, though finishing touches remained. On a crisp Saturday morning, Henry drove Rebecca to inspect the nearly completed house. Snow covered the surrounding fields, transforming the landscape into a glistening white canvas broken only by the new structure standing proudly on its rise. Inside, the rooms smelled of fresh wood and paint. Simple furniture, some purchased in Carlin and some made by local craftsmen, gave the house a lived-in feel despite its newness. It's perfect, Rebecca breathed, turning slowly in the main room. I never imagined I could own something so beautiful. You deserve this and more, Henry said, watching her with obvious pleasure. What do you think of the kitchen? Rebecca moved toward the back of the house, then stopped in the kitchen doorway with a gasp. In the center of the room stood a magnificent oak table with 8 chairs, far too grand for her modest house. Henry, where did this come from? I had it made in Elko, he admitted. A house needs a proper table for family gatherings. But it's too big for just me, she protested weakly, though her fingers traced the smooth wood with appreciation. Is it? Henry moved to stand beside her. Rebecca, you said you wanted to establish your independence before becoming my wife. Looking at this house, this home you've created, I'd say you've done that admirably. So I'm hoping this table isn't too large after all. I'm hoping it's just right for a family that might begin with 2 and grow from there. Rebecca turned to face him, her heart pounding. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Henry took both her hands in his. I'm saying I love you, Rebecca Wright. I'm saying that watching you build this house and make your place in Carlin has only deepened my admiration for you. And I'm asking if you're ready now to consider becoming Rebecca Stevens. Tears of happiness blurred her vision. Henry, are you proposing? For the second time, he reminded her with a smile. Though more formally now. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl. It was my mother's, he explained. My father gave it to her when they decided to come west and build a new life together. It seems fitting that it should now belong to a woman embarking on a similar journey. Rebecca couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Instead, she nodded vigorously, extending her trembling left hand. Henry slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for their first proper kiss, a gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate as months of restrained emotions found release. When they finally parted, both breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. Does spring seem too soon for a wedding? Say May. Rebecca laughed. May would be perfect. The school term ends in April, and the wildflowers will be blooming by then. They were married on the first Saturday in May, 1871, in Carlin's white-clapboard church. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, filling the small building to capacity. Rebecca wore a gown of ivory silk ordered specially from San Francisco, and carried a bouquet of desert wildflowers gathered by her students. Henry, handsome in a new suit, watched with undisguised adoration as she walked down the aisle toward him. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising love and faithfulness through whatever life might bring. The celebration afterward spilled from the church to the town square, where tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every household in Carlin. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, and a local fiddler struck up tunes for dancing. "Mrs. Stevens," Henry murmured as they moved together in their first dance as husband and wife. "How does it sound?" "Like a promise kept," Rebecca answered, her eyes shining with happiness. Later that night, after the last well-wishers had departed, Henry drove Rebecca not to his ranch as everyone expected, but to her house on the rise. "I thought we would stay at the Running S," she said, surprised. "We will tomorrow," Henry assured her. "But tonight, I wanted us to begin our married life here, in the home you built, to honor your courage and your independence, even as you chose to join your life with mine." Touched beyond words, Rebecca let him carry her across the threshold. Inside, she discovered he had prepared the house for their wedding night. A fire burned in the hearth, fresh flowers adorned every surface, and the bedroom was turned down invitingly. "When did you arrange all this?" she asked, amazed. "I have my secrets," Henry teased, "and helpful friends." That night, as they consummated their marriage in the house Rebecca had built from the ashes of broken promises, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. She had come west seeking security and found independence instead. She had arrived betrayed and alone, only to discover genuine love and community. As Henry held her close in the aftermath of their lovemaking, she traced the lines of his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "That sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with disappointment," she answered thoughtfully. "If Harlan Shaw had been the man he claimed to be in his letters, I never would have met you." "Then I owe Shaw a debt," Henry said, "though I'm still tempted to punch him if our paths ever cross." Rebecca laughed. "My gallant defender." "Always," he promised, drawing her closer. The morning after their wedding, Henry and Rebecca moved to the Running S, though they maintained her house as a special retreat and a tangible symbol of her independence. Rebecca continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named James, in the spring of 1872. 2 years later, a daughter, Elizabeth, joined the family, followed by another son, William, in 1876. As their family grew, so did the Running S, becoming one of the most prosperous ranches in Nevada under Henry's careful management. Rebecca eventually returned to teaching on a part-time basis when their youngest started school, helping to establish Carlin's first high school and library. Her little house became a gathering place for children who needed extra help with their studies, and later, a summer camp of sorts for her own children and their friends. In 1890, nearly 20 years after Rebecca first arrived in Carlin, a distinguished-looking stranger appeared at the Running S during the annual harvest festival that the Stevens family hosted for the community. Rebecca, now in her early 40s but still striking with her auburn hair only lightly touched with silver, was serving punch when the man approached. "Mrs. Stevens?" he inquired politely. "Rebecca Wright Stevens?" Something in his voice triggered a distant memory. Rebecca looked up into a face that had once been handsome but was now ravaged by hard living and disappointment. "Yes," she replied, uncertain. "You wouldn't remember me?" the man said awkwardly. "I'm Harlan Shaw." Rebecca nearly dropped the punch ladle. Mr. Shaw, this is unexpected. I know. He glanced around nervously. I probably shouldn't have come, but when I heard about the festival, I wanted to see for myself. See what, exactly? Rebecca asked, her voice cool. If the rumors were true. About you. About what you've made of yourself here. His eyes held genuine regret. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Mrs. Stevens. What I did to you, the lies I told, that's near the top of the list. Before Rebecca could respond, Henry appeared at her side, his protective stance making it clear he'd recognized their visitor. Shaw, he said flatly. You have some nerve showing up here. Harlan raised his hands placatingly. I'm not here to cause trouble, Stevens. Just to make amends, if possible. Amends? Henry's voice held disbelief. I owe your wife an apology, Harlan explained. A long overdue one. Rebecca studied the man who had once figured so prominently in her imagination. The real Harlan Shaw was nothing like the heroic figure she had constructed from his letters. He was simply a flawed man who had made poor choices. Why now, after all these years? She asked. Harlan shrugged uncomfortably. I'm dying, Mrs. Stevens. Consumption. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I've been trying to clean my slate, I suppose. Make peace where I can. Rebecca felt Henry tense beside her, but she laid a calming hand on his arm. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Shaw. Don't be. I've earned whatever's coming to me. Harlan's gaze moved between them. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did. And I'm glad it worked out for you. You have a beautiful family, a fine ranch. Yes, Rebecca agreed, looking up at Henry with a smile. I have been very blessed. Harlan nodded, seeming to understand that was all the forgiveness he would receive. I'll be on my way then. Thank you for hearing me out. As he turned to leave, Rebecca called after him. Mr. Shaw. He paused, looking back questioningly. Whatever your reasons were for writing those letters, they brought me west. And for that, at least, I am grateful. A ghost of a smile crossed Harlan's haggard face. Good day, Mrs. Stevens. Mr. Stevens. They watched him walk away, a solitary figure soon lost among the festival goers. Are you all right? Henry asked, his arm sliding around her waist. Rebecca leaned into his embrace. Perfectly all right. It's strange, but seeing him now, the real Harlan Shaw, I realize how completely I've moved beyond that disappointment. It's like a story that happened to someone else. You're an extraordinary woman, Rebecca Stevens, Henry said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Every day, I thank God that Harlan Shaw was a liar who couldn't keep his promises. Rebecca laughed, the sound bright and clear in the autumn air. And I thank God that you're a man who could. That evening, after the festival concluded and their guests departed, Henry and Rebecca sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. Their children were inside, the older ones helping the younger with bedtime preparations, their voices drifting out through open windows. 20 years, Henry mused, taking Rebecca's hand in his. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you by that tumble-down shack. Other times, I can hardly remember my life before you were in it. 20 wonderful years, Rebecca agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. With many more to come. Do you ever regret it? Coming west on false pretenses. Rebecca considered the question seriously. No. It was a leap of faith that brought me exactly where I was meant to be. If Harlan Shaw's letters had been truthful, I might have had a comfortable life, but I wouldn't have found this. She gestured to encompass their home, their land, their family. I wouldn't have found you. Henry squeezed her hand gently. When I rewrote the deed to that property and gave it to you, I never imagined how completely you would transform not just that land, but my entire existence. We transformed each other, Rebecca corrected softly. You showed me what real strength looks like, not in grand promises, but in quiet, consistent action. In promises kept, day after day, year after year. Inside the house, their youngest son called for them. Henry rose, helping Rebecca to her feet with the same tenderness he had shown since the day they met. "Shall we, Mrs. Stevens?" he asked, offering his arm with a playful formality that had become a cherished ritual between them. "Indeed, Mr. Stevens," she responded, slipping her hand through the crook of his elbow. Together, they walked into the warm light of their home, leaving behind the lengthening shadows of evening, a man and woman who had built a life from unexpected beginnings, who had found in each other the fulfillment of promises neither had originally made, but both had chosen to keep.